They believed he was a diplomat. He was the weapon they didn't see coming. The Crithian War Council had made their decision 3 cycles ago. Earth would fall within the month. Ambassador Kyle Martinez stepped off the transport vessel onto their Obsidian command station with nothing but a leather briefcase and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The aliens towered over him, their crystalline exoskeletons reflecting the harsh blue light of their artificial sun. They had invited him here to deliver humanity's surrender terms. They had no idea what they had actually invited aboard. Commander Zolf clicked his mandibles in what passed for Crithian laughter. 12 of their dreadnoughts surrounded Earth's moon. The human ships were burning in the void, their distress signals growing weaker by the hour. This diplomat was their last pathetic attempt at negotiation. The thought amused him. Kyle set his briefcase on the polished stone table and met Zolf's 4 compound eyes without flinkering. The room held 20 of the Crithian High Command, each one a veteran of 100 conquered worlds. Behind them, floor-to-ceiling windows showed the vast armada that had crushed every human defense fleet sent against it. Zalth gestured with one-bladed appendage. You may present your world's surrender, human. Make it brief. We have schedules to maintain. Kyle's smile widened just a fraction. Actually, Commander, I'm here to accept yours. The Crithians erupted in harsh clicking sounds, their version of hysterical laughter. Zolf leaned forward, his massive form casting Kyle in shadow. Your species amuses us. 23 billion of you and not one understands basic military mathematics. We outnumber your warships 50 to 1. Your weapons can barely scratch our hulls. What possible leverage do you imagine you possess? Kyle opened his briefcase. Inside sat a single metallic sphere no larger than a marble suspended in the gel matrix. This is a compressed sample of human neural tissue, specifically mine. Your scientists will want to study it after I'm done. For the historical record. Zalth's amusement faded. Done with what exactly? Kyle lifted the sphere out carefully, holding it up to the light. You see, humanity has a unique evolutionary trait. We're the only species in the galaxy that weaponized our own consciousness. Every human contains a quantum observer effect strong enough to collapse probability fields. Most never realize it. We just call it imagination, creativity, stubborn hope. But people like me, we learn to focus it, to aim it. The commander's talons scraped against stone. You're stalling for your fleet to arrive. We're tracking every human vessel within 10 light years. None are coming. Kyle placed the sphere back in its case. I don't need a fleet, Commander. I just need you to make one critical mistake. And 10 seconds ago you already did. You let me aboard your command station. You put me in the same room as your entire high command. And you gave me exactly enough time. The lights flickered. Zalf's communication implant suddenly screamed with emergency channels all opening at once. Every screen in the room flashed the same impossible message. All dreadnought main reactors showing critical cascade failure simultaneously. Kyle's smile never wavered. Welcome to humanity's real weapon. Now, shall we discuss your surrender terms? Zalf lunged across the table with speed that would have killed a normal human. His crystalline claws stopped 3 inches from Kyle's throat, frozen in midair as if hitting an invisible barrier. The commander strained against nothing, his entire body trembling with effort. Around the room, other Crithian officers reached for weapons they suddenly couldn't touch. Their fingers passed through plasma rifles and energy blades as if they were ghosts. Kyle stood and walked past Zalth's paralyzed form to the massive windows. Outside, the dreadnoughts were listing badly, their running lights stuttering in patterns that spelled catastrophic system failure. You're wondering how this is possible. Your scientists told you humans were just another carbon-based life form. Unremarkable. Weak. They were half right. We are weak. Individually, we're fragile meatbags that die from falling downstairs or eating the wrong mushroom. But there's something your scientists missed in their biological surveys. He turned back to face the frozen commanders. Human consciousness doesn't operate the way yours does. You think in linear probability streams. When you calculate an outcome, you find the most likely result and follow it. Efficient, predictable. But humans, we imagine thousands of contradictory futures simultaneously. We believe in things that don't exist yet and make them real through sheer stubborn insistence. We looked at empty sky and imagined flying, at dark caves and imagined electric light, at impossible distances and imagined voices traveling faster than sound. Every human advancement came from someone ignoring what was probable and insisting on what was possible. Kyle walked between the statues of Crithian warriors, each one locked in their moment of attack. The military discovered this trait could be weaponized about 6 years into your invasion. Started with a soldier named Danny Chen in the Battle of Europa Station. He was trapped in a damaged fighter, life support failing, enemy ships closing in. According to physics, according to probability, according to every rational calculation, he was dead. But Danny didn't accept that. He imagined his weapons working despite having no power. He imagined his engines firing despite having no fuel. And for exactly 7.3 seconds, reality bent to match his imagination. He took out 4 Crithian destroyers before his heart gave out from the strain. Zalth's eyes tracked Kyle's movement, the only part of him still mobile. His mind raced through tactical assessments, searching for the flaw in this insanity. Humans couldn't rewrite physics. It violated every known law of the universe. Kyle seemed to read his thoughts. You're right to be skeptical. It does violate the laws of physics. But here's what your scientists never understood. Laws are just patterns, and patterns can be interrupted if you push hard enough. That's what Danny discovered, what I perfected. The human brain generates a quantum field strong enough to force temporary probability collapse in our favor. It costs us tremendously. Danny's heart exploded from the neural feedback. Most of the early test subjects died within minutes, but the military got better at managing it, training people like me to survive longer, to push harder. He returned to his briefcase and pulled out a slim tablet. On its screen, biometric data scrolled past in incomprehensible streams. Right now, my neural output is sustaining 17 simultaneous probability manipulations across your entire fleet. I've convinced the quantum field around your reactors that containment failure is more probable than continued function. I've made your weapons believe they don't exist in any meaningful way, and I've locked your command structure into a local reality bubble where movement requires more energy than your bodies can generate. All of this is happening because I'm imagining it hard enough to make it real. The strain showed in Kyle's face now. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands trembled slightly. This is the part they don't show in the propaganda videos. Every second I maintain this costs me. My neurons are firing at rates that would kill any other organism. My heart is beating 300 times per minute. I'm burning through my body's resources faster than they can replenish. In about 4 more minutes, I'll start having seizures. In 6, my brain will begin shutting down non-essential functions. At 8 minutes, I'll go into cardiac arrest. He pulled up a chair and sat down heavily, facing Zalth's frozen form. But here's the beautiful part, Commander. I don't need to survive. I just need to last long enough for you to understand what you're facing. Humanity sent me here alone because one human consciousness, properly trained and focused, is more dangerous to your species than any fleet. You can't shoot what you can't touch. You can't escape what's already rewritten your reality. And you definitely can't win a war against opponents who refuse to accept that losing is even possible. The tablet chirped softly. Kyle glanced at it and nodded with satisfaction. Your fleet admirals are receiving the peace terms now. Complete withdrawal from human space, reparations for our losses, and a 50-light-year, demilitarized buffer zone around Earth. They have 4 minutes to accept before my consciousness fails and your ships finish tearing themselves apart. I suggest you motivate them to choose quickly. Zalth felt control returning to his vocal synthesizer, just barely. This is madness. Your species will burn itself out. You'll create weapons that destroy yourselves. Kyle's laugh was bitter and tired. You think we don't know that? Commander, humans have been creating weapons that could destroy ourselves since we figured out how to split atoms. We've had extinction-level arsenals for centuries. The difference is, we're willing to risk our own destruction to protect our freedom. Are you willing to lose your entire invasion force to prove a point? The communication channels erupted with urgent transmissions. Fleet Admiral Krell's voice came through on emergency override, agreeing to every human demand. Kyle released the probability locks gradually, letting the Crythians regain movement in stages. Zalth collapsed forward onto the table, his crystalline armor scraping against stone as he gasped for oxygen his species didn't even need. The psychological impact alone was devastating. Around him, his officers stumbled and fell, their legs unable to remember how walking worked after being frozen. But Kyle wasn't watching them. His attention had shifted to the tablet, where new data streams were coming in from Earth. His expression darkened as he read the encrypted messages. The Crithian withdrawal was proceeding according to terms, but intelligence had picked up something else. Radio chatter from the far edges of Crithian space, where their empire stretched across 600 conquered systems. They were mobilizing something bigger, something they called the Compliance Protocol. Zalth caught the change in Kyle's expression and managed a rasping laugh despite his exhaustion. You think you've won, human? This was one battle group. A test force. When the Empire learns what you can do, they'll send the Purifiers. They specialize in exterminating species that pose existential threats. No negotiation, no mercy. Just systematic obliteration. Kyle's hands were shaking worse now. The neural feedback was catching up with him. Blood vessels had burst in his eyes, turning the whites red. You're bluffing. Your fleet just tucked tail and ran. This fleet was commanded by warriors who value their lives, Zalth said, pushing himself upright with obvious effort. The Purifiers are different. They're volunteers who've undergone neural pruning. No fear response. No self-preservation instinct. Just absolute commitment to protecting the Empire from threats like you. And they number in the hundreds of millions. Kyle felt his heart rate spike dangerously. The medical implant in his chest buzzed a warning against his ribs. He had maybe 2 minutes before total neural collapse. He made a split-second decision that would haunt him for the rest of his brief life. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small syringe filled with silver liquid. The label read, Project Cascade. Handle with extreme caution. Zalth's eyes widened in recognition. His intelligence network had caught whispers of this. You can't be serious. That's experimental. Your own report said it had a 98% mortality rate. Kyle jammed the needle into his neck and pushed the plunger. 100% mortality rate, actually. The 2% who survived the initial injection died within 48 hours. But for those 48 hours, they became something beyond human. Something your purifiers won't be ready for. The effect was immediate. Kyle's pupils dilated until his eyes were entirely black. The air around him began to shimmer with visible distortion as his quantum field expanded exponentially. Every light in the command center shattered simultaneously, plunging the room into darkness lit only by emergency strips and the glow of failing computer screens. When Kyle spoke again, his voice carried harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from human vocal cords. I'm transmitting a message to your Empire right now. Not through your communication systems, through something deeper. I'm touching the quantum substrate that underlies all matter in this region of space. Every Crithian within 30 light-years just felt me in their minds. They know what I am now. What humanity can become when we stop limiting ourselves. Zalth tried to back away, but found his legs wouldn't obey. The neural pathways that controlled movement were being overridden by Kyle's expanded consciousness. What are you doing? Kyle's form seemed to flicker, existing in multiple positions at once. I'm showing your Empire why sending more ships won't work. Why the purifiers will fail. I'm demonstrating that human consciousness, when pushed beyond its safety limits, can touch the fundamental fabric of reality itself. Watch. He raised one hand toward the window. Beyond the glass, one of the damaged dreadnoughts suddenly compressed, folding in on itself like paper being crumpled. It didn't explode. It simply ceased existing in three-dimensional space, collapsing into a point of infinite density before winking out of existence entirely. 11 more dreadnoughts remained. Kyle made a sweeping gesture, and 3 more followed the first into oblivion. Your shields, your armor, your weapons, all of it is based on manipulating the physical properties of matter and energy, but I'm operating at a level beneath physics. I'm editing the source code of reality. Your ships aren't being destroyed. They're being unmarked as real. Deleted from the universe's probability matrix. Blood was pouring from Kyle's nose now, running down his chin and staining his diplomatic suit. The medical implant had given up trying to compensate and was simply recording data for whatever scientist eventually performed his autopsy. But his power kept growing. The entire command station shuddered as local gravity fluctuated wildly. Zalth managed to activate his emergency communicator with a thought command. This is Commander Zalth to all Crythian forces. Retreat order Alpha Omega. All ships withdraw immediately to minimum safe distance of 100,000 kilometers. This is not a drill. Repeat Alpha Omega retreat. Kyle laughed, and the sound made reality ripple. You think distance will save them? I can feel your whole fleet, Commander. Every ship, every crew member, every weapon system, they're all just patterns of probability to me now, and I can reach as far as I need to. His consciousness expanded outward like a wave. On Earth, scientists monitoring the quantum field detectors saw readings that made no sense. The field Kyle was generating had grown so large it was detectable from 3-star systems away. In the military command bunker beneath Geneva, General Linda Hayes watched the data with a mixture of awe and horror. She had authorized this mission. She had approved Kyle's request to use the Cascade Serum. Now she was watching a human being transcend into something that could threaten the fabric of space itself. One of her analysts turned from his console, his face pale. General, we're detecting quantum fluctuations propagating through subspace. If Martinez continues escalating, he could trigger a probability cascade that spreads beyond our ability to contain. We're talking about reality destabilization across multiple light years. Hayes closed her eyes briefly. She had known this was possible. The research teams had warned that cascade might not have an upper limit, that a human consciousness freed from biological constraints might keep expanding until it either burned out or fundamentally altered the structure of local space-time. She opened a secure channel to the backup team waiting in stealth orbit near the Crithian station. Activate Contingency 7. Prepare for immediate extraction and neural shutdown. Back on the station, Kyle's awareness had grown so vast he could perceive Zelth's thoughts directly. He saw the commander's terror, his desperate attempts to formulate a strategy, his growing certainty that his entire species had made a catastrophic error in judgment. But Kyle also saw something else. Deep in Zelth's memories, buried under layers of military conditioning, was a single moment from the commander's childhood. A moment of wonder, standing beneath the triple moons of his homeworld, imagining what lay beyond the stars. That tiny spark of imagination, so similar to what drove humanity, cut through Kyle's expanding power like a knife. He had been preparing to eliminate the entire Crithian fleet, to make an example so devastating that no alien species would ever threaten Earth again. But that memory reminded him of something crucial. The Crithians weren't evil. They were just afraid. Afraid of the unknown. Afraid of threats to their empire. The same fear that had driven humanity to create weapons like him. Kyle pulled his consciousness back, compressing it slowly and carefully. The lights flickered back on. The gravity stabilized. The remaining 8 dreadnoughts stopped their panicked retreat. He looked at Zelth with eyes that had seen too much, that had touched the fundamental nature of existence and been changed by it. "I could end your species right now," Kyle said quietly. "I could reach across space and simply decide that Crithians don't exist anymore. The universe would agree with me, but that would make me the monster you feared we were. So instead, I'm going to give you a choice. Go back to your empire. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them that humanity has weapons that can rewrite reality itself. But also tell them this: we don't want to use them. We never wanted this war. We just want to be left alone to explore the stars in peace." Zal stared at him, mandibles working soundlessly. "And if we refuse? If the Empire decides you're too dangerous to leave alive? Then I'll have died for nothing," Kyle said, swaying on his feet. "Because the Cascade serum is killing me right now. My neurons are firing so fast they're cooking my brain tissue. My heart is going to stop in about 90 seconds. But before I die, I'll have shown your empire something important. That humans would rather burn ourselves out in a blaze of impossible power than accept defeat. That we'll weaponize our own consciousness, our own imagination, our own stubborn refusal to acknowledge limits. And if you send your purifiers, Earth will just make more weapons like me. Each one more desperate. Each one more willing to push further into madness. Is that really the war you want to fight?" The commander looked around his ruined command center, at his traumatized officers, at the empty spaces in the sky where 4 dreadnoughts had simply ceased to exist. Then he looked back at the dying human who had done all of this alone. No, that is not a war the Empire can win. I will deliver your message. But know this, Kyle Martinez. You've changed everything. The galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again. You've made us all afraid of what you might become." Kyle smiled weakly as his legs finally gave out. He slumped into the chair, his body shutting down system by system. "Good. Fear keeps people honest. It keeps them from making stupid decisions like invading planets full of beings crazy enough to weaponize their own minds. Now get your people out of here before I lose consciousness and my quantum field collapses." The backlash might take this whole station with it. Zalf didn't need to be told twice. He barked orders in his native language, and the Crithian officers scrambled for the exits. Within 30 seconds, the command center was empty except for Kyle and the sound of his own labored breathing. He watched through the windows the remaining Crithian ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into the void, running from Earth with the same terror they usually inspired in their enemies. His communicator chirped. The extraction team was 10 seconds out. They would grab him, put him in medical stasis, maybe buy him another week or 2 of life while Earth's best doctors tried to undo what the Cascade serum had done to his brain. But Kyle knew the truth. He had read the classified reports. Nobody survived Cascade. The human consciousness wasn't meant to touch reality at that level. It was like sticking your hand into a nuclear reactor. You might accomplish something amazing, but the price was always fatal. He thought about his sister back on Earth, about the niece he would never meet, about the quiet life he could have had if humanity hadn't needed weapons desperate enough to volunteer for suicide missions. But he also thought about the 23 billion people sleeping safely tonight because one man had been willing to burn himself out to protect them. That had to count for something. The extraction team materialized around him in a flash of transport light. medical technicians with equipment that looked more like torture devices. They would try to save him. He appreciated the effort, but as they loaded him onto a stretcher and began the emergency neural stabilization procedures, Kyle's last conscious thought was simple and clear. He had bought Earth time. Time to prepare better defenses. Time to find weapons that didn't require killing the people who used them. Time to become the species that could stand equal among the stars without destroying themselves in the process. Whether humanity used that time wisely wasn't his problem anymore. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him, secure in the knowledge that his sacrifice meant something, that his death would be remembered, that somewhere in a Crithian strategy room, commanders would be rewriting their entire understanding of what it meant to fight humans, and that was victory enough for one diplomat who had never wanted to be a weapon in the first place. 3 days later, Kyle Martinez died in a medical facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. His brain had finally succumbed to the massive neural damage caused by sustaining a quantum field, strong enough to alter reality. The autopsy revealed that his neurons had been firing at rates previously thought impossible for organic tissue. His hippocampus had essentially melted. His cerebral cortex showed burn patterns consistent with electrical overload. By all conventional medical understanding, he should have died within minutes of injecting the Cascade serum. That he had lasted 72 hours was testament to either incredible willpower or incredible stubbornness. With humans, it was often hard to tell the difference. General Hayes attended the funeral with full military honors. She stood in the rain at Arlington National Cemetery and watched them lower Kyle's casket into the ground. Above them, invisible to the naked eye, 3 new defensive satellites hummed with power. Project Cascade had been permanently suspended. The cost was too high. The moral weight too heavy. Humanity would find other ways to defend itself. Ways that didn't require turning volunteers into living weapons that burned out like shooting stars. But as Hayes walked away from the grave, she couldn't shake the feeling that Kyle's sacrifice had revealed something important about humanity's place in the galaxy. They were the species that looked at impossible odds and refused to accept defeat. The species that would weaponize their own consciousness if that's what survival demanded. The species that scared even themselves with what they were willing to become. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly the reputation they needed to survive out here among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the one species crazy enough to make reality itself into a weapon. That was the legacy Kyle Martinez left behind. A galaxy that now knew humanity's secret. That underneath the diplomatic smiles and peaceful overtures was a species that could touch the fundamental fabric of existence and make it scream. The Crithians spread that message across their empire within a week. Other species heard it and recalculated their threat assessments. Earth's isolation had ended not with welcome but with fear, and maybe that was the only honest way to join the galactic community. By showing everyone exactly what you were capable of when pushed into a corner. The rain fell harder as Hayes reached her vehicle. She thought about the other volunteers in the Cascade program, the ones who had been waiting in case Kyle failed. They could go home now. Live normal lives. Grow old without their brains melting from the inside out. That was something at least. One small mercy in a universe that seemed determined to test humanity's limits at every turn. She drove away from Arlington without looking back, carrying the weight of command and the knowledge that if Earth ever faced extinction again, there were still files marked top secret that contained instructions for making weapons out of human consciousness. She hoped they would never need to open those files. But she also knew that hope wasn't a strategy. And humanity had survived this long by being willing to do whatever survival demanded, no matter how terrible the cost. 6 months after Kyle's death, his niece was born. Her parents named her Maya, after the ancient concept of illusion and reality intertwining. They never told her about her uncle. Not at first. What do you say to a child about family members who died rewriting the laws of physics? How do you explain that their sacrifice made the nightmares go away, at least for a while? So they waited, and Maya grew up in a world where humans could walk safely among the stars, never knowing the price that had been paid for that freedom. But the galaxy remembered. On Crithian worlds, Kyle Martinez became a legend told to military cadets as a cautionary tale. The human who could delete ships from existence with a thought. The diplomat who was actually a living weapon. The species that would burn itself out rather than surrender. Crithian strategists developed new protocols, new defenses, new ways to counter human quantum manipulation. They spent billions on research, on countermeasures, on theoretical weapons that might stand against someone who could edit reality itself. What they failed to understand was that Kyle had been unique. Yes, the Cascade program existed. Yes, other humans had the potential to weaponize their consciousness. But Kyle had possessed something extra. A combination of mental discipline, creative visualization ability, and sheer stubborn willpower that occurred maybe once in a generation. The military tried to replicate his success with other volunteers. They refined the serum, improved the training protocols, added better medical support systems. None of it mattered. The best they could achieve were brief flickers of probability manipulation before the test subjects collapsed into seizures or comas. Kyle's level of power remained unreachable, a statistical outlier that defied replication. General Hayes understood this better than anyone. She had reviewed every piece of data from Kyle's mission dozens of times. She had watched the degradation of his neural tissue in high-definition scans. She had read the psychological evaluations that showed his unique mental architecture, and she had come to a sobering conclusion. They couldn't make more Kyle Martinez's. They could only hope that his demonstration had been enough to deter future threats. It was a gamble. The biggest gamble Earth had ever made. But it was all they had. The Carithian Empire withdrew to their core territories and fortified. They stopped expanding, stopped conquering. Their entire military doctrine shifted from offensive expansion to defensive consolidation. Word spread to other spacefaring civilizations. The Vryn Collective, who had been planning their own incursion into human space, quietly shelved those plans. The Skellig Communion, known for aggressive first contact protocols, suddenly became very interested in diplomatic relations and cultural exchange programs with Earth. Nobody wanted to risk encountering another human like Kyle Martinez. For Earth, the breathing room was essential. Humanity poured resources into proper defensive technologies. Not weapons that required sacrificing volunteers, but actual sustainable military infrastructure. Shield generators based on quantum field theory that Kyle's data had helped unlock. Faster-than-light drives that incorporated probability manipulation at safe levels. Weapons platforms that could create localized reality distortions without needing a human consciousness to power them. They were building an arsenal that could protect Earth without burning through their people like ammunition. But there were complications nobody had anticipated. The data from Kyle's final mission revealed something troubling. When he had touched the quantum substrate of reality, he had left markers, tiny fluctuations in the probability field that persisted even after his death. Scientists called them Martinez patterns. They were spread across 30 light-years of space, subtle enough that most sensors couldn't detect them, but definitely present. And they were growing. Not fast, but measurably. The quantum echoes of Kyle's consciousness were propagating through space like ripples in a pond, affecting probability distributions in ways nobody fully understood. Dr. Patricia Cole, Earth's leading expert in quantum consciousness, spent years studying the Martinez patterns. She published papers suggesting they might represent a form of distributed intelligence, that Kyle's consciousness, rather than dying, had somehow imprinted itself onto the quantum field in a way that allowed fragments of his awareness to persist. It was controversial research. Half the scientific community called it wishful thinking. The other half called it terrifying. Nobody could agree on what it meant or whether it posed a threat. Maya Martinez learned about her uncle when she turned 16. Her parents sat her down and showed her the declassified videos from the Carithian command station. She watched Kyle face down an entire invasion fleet. Watched him inject the Cascade serum. Watched him literally make ships cease to exist with gestures and force of will. Then she watched the medical footage from his final days. The seizures. The neural degradation. The slow, agonizing death of a man who had pushed human consciousness beyond its breaking point. She didn't cry. She just sat in silence for a long time, processing what she had seen. Finally, she asked the question her parents had been dreading. Could I do that? Do I have whatever he had? Her father, a veteran of the Europa Station battle, shook his head firmly. The military tested everyone in Kyle's bloodline. You don't have the neural architecture. Neither do your cousins. Whatever made Kyle special, it wasn't purely genetic. Good, Maya said, because I never want to be that afraid of what I'm capable of. But as the years passed, Maya found herself drawn to the study of quantum mechanics and consciousness research. She wanted to understand what her uncle had done, not to replicate it, but to comprehend it, to find the boundaries between human potential and human destruction. She enrolled in the Mars Institute of Quantum Studies at age 20, one of the youngest students they had ever accepted. Her professors noted her unusual aptitude for conceptualizing probability fields, her ability to intuitively grasp concepts that took other students months to understand. But they also noted her caution, her reluctance to push experiments too far, as if she carried the knowledge of what happened when limits were exceeded. By age 25, Maya had published 3 breakthrough papers on safe quantum field manipulation, methods for achieving probability shifts without neural feedback, techniques for distributing the cognitive load across multiple participants so no single person bore the full weight, ways to weaponize human consciousness that didn't require burning out the user. The military recruited her immediately, offering positions, funding, resources beyond imagination. She turned them all down. Instead, she founded the Martinez Foundation, dedicated to researching quantum consciousness ethically and safely. No more suicide weapons, no more volunteers dying to protect Earth. If humanity was going to use their unique mental abilities to defend themselves, they would do it in ways that didn't destroy the defenders. It was a lofty goal, maybe impossible. But Maya had learned from her uncle's example that humans specialized in achieving the impossible, even when it killed them. She just wanted to find a way to achieve it without the killing part. The Foundation's first major project involved studying the Martinez patterns. Maya assembled a team of the best scientists Earth had to offer and sent them into space with specialized quantum sensors. Their mission was simple: map the patterns, understand them, figure out if they represented a threat or an opportunity. What they discovered would change everything humanity thought they knew about consciousness, death, and the nature of reality itself. The patterns weren't random. They formed structures, complex, evolving structures that showed signs of intentional design. And at the center of the largest pattern cluster, exactly where Kyle had died aboard the Crithian medical transport, the quantum fluctuation spelled out a message in binary code, a message that took 3 months to fully decode, a message that read simply, "Not dead. Changed. Waiting." Maya stood in the Foundation's main laboratory, staring at the decoded message projected on the wall. Around her, scientists were arguing about interpretation, about whether this was truly a message from Kyle or just pareidolia, humans finding patterns where none existed. But Maya knew. She could feel it in the same intuitive way she understood quantum mechanics. Her uncle hadn't died. He had transcended, become something that existed as probability itself rather than physical matter. The question was whether that was a good thing. She pulled up the full scan data from the Martinez patterns. They had spread across 40 light-years now, forming a web of quantum fluctuations that touched 17 different star systems. In each system, strange things had started happening. Crithian military sensors occasionally picked up impossible readings, ships that appeared and disappeared, gravitational anomalies that violated known physics. The Vryn Collective reported similar phenomena. And just last week, a human exploration vessel had encountered what they described as a consciousness existing in the fabric of space itself, a presence that communicated through probability manipulation, showing them safe routes through an asteroid field by simply making the dangerous paths feel wrong. Maya accessed the secure channel to General Hayes, now retired but still consulted on matters of quantum warfare. "We need to talk about my uncle. I think he's still out there. Still active." Hayes appeared on the screen. Older now, but still carrying that weight of command. "We know. Intelligence has been tracking the patterns for years. We just didn't want to alarm the public. The question is whether Kyle Martinez still thinks like a human, or if he's become something else entirely. Something that might not have humanity's best interests in mind." "There's only one way to find out," Maya said. "We need to make contact. Real contact, not just studying patterns from a distance. We need to reach out to whatever Kyle has become and talk to him." The general's expression was grave. "Do you understand what you're proposing? If Kyle's consciousness has been existing as quantum fluctuations for 7 years, spread across dozens of light years, he might not be sane by any definition we understand. He might not even remember being human. And if he's hostile, we have no weapons that could stop something that exists as probability itself." "Then we'd better hope he remembers why he sacrificed himself in the first place," Maya replied, "because the alternative is living in a galaxy where a godlike quantum entity is slowly spreading through space with unknown intentions. I'd rather face that uncertainty with attempted communication than ignorance. It took 6 months to build the device." Maya called it the Cascade Interface, though it bore little resemblance to the serum that had killed Kyle. This was different. Instead of pushing one human consciousness beyond its limits, it used a network of 50 volunteers working in concert, their neural patterns synchronized through quantum entanglement. Each person would contribute a small piece of the necessary power, distributing the load so no one burned out. Together, they would project a signal strong enough to reach Kyle's distributed consciousness and hopefully receive a coherent response. The volunteers were all soldiers, men and women who had served in the defense of Earth and understood the stakes. They trained for months, learning to synchronize their thought patterns, to visualize probability fields in unison, to act as a single distributed consciousness rather than 50 separate minds. Maya joined them, despite protests from the Military Oversight Committee. If her uncle was out there, she wanted to be part of the conversation. The interface activation happened in a facility on the dark side of Luna, far from civilian populations in case something went catastrophically wrong. I lay in the medical cradle surrounded by 49 other volunteers, each one connected to the quantum field generator through neural induction caps. The countdown reached 0 and the system activated. The sensation was unlike anything Maya had experienced. Her consciousness expanded outward, merging with the others, forming a unified awareness that stretched across space. She could feel the Martinez patterns now, not as abstract data, but as living thought. And there, at the center of it all, was something that had once been Kyle Martinez. Something vast and strange and utterly alone. Uncle? She thought into the void. It's Maya, your niece. I don't know if you remember me, but I need to know if you're still in there. Still human. Still Kyle. The response came as a cascade of probability shifts that resolved into something approximating language. Maya, I remember. But memory is different now. I experience all moments simultaneously. Past, present, potential futures. I remember being human the way you might remember being 5 years old. It happened, but it's distant. Changed by everything that came after. The other volunteers gasped as Kyle's presence touched their linked consciousness. He was massive. Not in physical size, but in scope of awareness. He existed across light years, processing information at speeds that made quantum computers look slow. And yet, beneath the vast alien consciousness, there were still echoes of the man who had volunteered for a suicide mission to save his species. Why did you stay? Maya asked. Why didn't you just dissipate into the quantum field? Why keep existing like this? Because the galaxy is more dangerous than anyone on Earth realizes. Kyle's presence responded. The Crithians were just one threat. There are things moving in the darkness between stars. Ancient species that view consciousness itself as a resource to harvest. Entities that exist in dimensions we can barely perceive. I stayed because I could see them. Could understand the threats that your sensors can't detect. I became Earth's early warning system. Its guardian in the places where conventional forces can't operate. Maya felt his sincerity, his continued commitment to protecting humanity, even in his transformed state, but she also felt his loneliness, the isolation of being something that existed between the spaces of normal reality. Are you happy? She asked quietly. The question seemed to surprise him. His presence flickered with something that might have been laughter or might have been sorrow. Happy isn't a concept that applies to me anymore. But I am purposeful. I am useful. And I am preventing horrors that would make the Crithian invasion look like a minor border dispute. That has to be enough. You don't have to do this alone, Maya said. We built this interface specifically so we could help. So you wouldn't have to carry everything by yourself. Kyle's presence wrapped around the 50 linked consciousnesses, gently examining the interface they had built. This is good work. Better than I could have hoped for. But you need to understand something. The threats I'm monitoring operate on timescales and in dimensions that human consciousness wasn't designed to perceive. You can help in specific moments, specific battles. But the long watch, the endless vigil in the dark, that's something I have to do alone because I'm the only one who can exist in those spaces without losing what makes us human. Then we'll be your anchor, Maya responded. Regular contact to remind you what being human means. Updates on Earth, on the family, on all the small, ordinary things that matter to people who still experience linear time. You protect us from the darkness. We'll protect you from forgetting why that matters. The interface hummed with power as Kyle's consciousness interfaced more deeply with the volunteer network. They could see through his perception now. Could glimpse the threats he had been monitoring. Things that moved through higher dimensional space. Predatory intelligences that fed on quantum coherence. Ancient wars between species that had forgotten why they started fighting millennia ago, and Earth, tiny and vulnerable, sitting at the crossroads of forces that could snuff out humanity without even noticing. But they also saw Kyle's defenses, probability shields he had woven across approaches to human space, quantum mines that would collapse hostile consciousness fields, early warning markers that would alert him to threats long before they reached detection range. He had been preparing for wars that hadn't started yet, fighting battles in the spaces between moments, doing it all alone because there was nobody else who could. The interface session lasted 4 hours. When Maya finally disconnected, her brain felt like it had been used as a musical instrument. The other volunteers were in similar condition, exhausted but exhilarated. They had touched something beyond human comprehension and come back changed but still themselves. And they had established a connection that would let them reach out to Kyle whenever needed, to provide support and coordinate defenses against threats normal humans couldn't perceive. General Hayes reviewed the mission data with barely contained relief. So he's on our side. Still protecting Earth despite everything. More than that, Maya corrected her. He's evolving. Becoming something that can stand equal to the ancient horrors out there. And as long as we maintain contact, as long as we remind him of his humanity, he won't become one of those horrors himself. My uncle died to become a weapon. But we're going to make sure that weapon never forgets it was human first. She looked out the window at Earth rising over Luna's horizon, at the billions of people sleeping safely because a man named Kyle Martinez had been willing to sacrifice not just his life, but his entire existence as a physical being. The diplomat who had been the weapon nobody saw coming had become something greater, a guardian that existed in the spaces between realities, watching for threats that nightmares were made of, protecting a species that barely understood how much danger they were really in. And as long as Maya and her volunteers kept reaching out, kept reminding him what humanity meant, Kyle Martinez would continue that watch. Not as a human, not as a weapon, but as something that chose to be both and neither, standing between Earth and the darkness that waited in the quantum depths of space. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's ability to weaponize consciousness. What they didn't know yet was that humanity had also learned to weaponize hope, compassion, and the stubborn insistence that even transcendent quantum entities deserved connection and purpose. Kyle Martinez had shown them what one human could become when pushed beyond all limits. His niece was showing them what humanity could become when they refused to let their weapons forget they had once been people. And somewhere in the quantum substrate of reality, existing across light years and dimensions, Kyle felt that connection and knew his sacrifice had meant something after all. Not an ending, but a transformation. Not death, but change. And in that change, the promise that humanity might actually survive the galaxy's dangers without losing what made them worth saving in the first place.